Hello there, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns. I'm really excited to be here with you today, and I am. This is actually an impromptu episode here. I had a cancellation on a coaching appointment a few moments ago, so I had some free time, and why not record a podcast? That's my new motto. I think that's something to live by. It really is quite lovely to be able to, to express some of these ideas, and know that there's people out there who are going to listen to me. I say this in my presentations all the time, like in the workshops that I do. I'm like, if you 6 or 8 or 10 people weren't sitting here, I could still be talking, to the wall behind my computer here. But it is really nice to have somebody who is actually hearing me. So thank you very much for being here. And so today, and if I remember to title the episode, you will have already known this point. But the sort of theme of today's, or the concept on which today's episode is built around, is a very wonderful phrase that I hear quite often in the work of not only mindfulness, but also in the work of neuroscience, or in the world of neuroscience. I don't call myself a neuroscientist by any means, but I'm fascinated by it, and I read a lot of it, and I love it, and I absorb as much as I can. And so the phrase that I hear come up quite often is as follows: where attention goes, energy flows. Isn't that wonderful? And again, this is not just a spiritual concept, although it is. It applies in all the realms of spirituality in every way that we can talk about that. But it is also rooted very firmly in a scientific understanding. Because the thing is that our whole body is motivated by energy. There's no question about that. Dan Siegel calls the mind the system. I'm gonna butcher his. Please don't quote me on this, but essentially he's calling it a system that is processing and regulating energy and information flow. Okay, now that's as scientist as you can get. Is Dan Siegel. Now, he's also got a very spiritual side to him, but I mean, he is hardcore science, right? And he's one of the people who talks about this. So what we mean by that, right? Like, energy flows, yeah? Let's say I'm going to type the title of this podcast, and I hope that I remember to title it "Where Attention Goes, Energy Flows," because that's a beautiful title. So when I'm typing that, right, there is an energy in my brain, which, the language area of my brain and the emotional layer of my brain are both sort of coming together to form this sentence that I want to type, yeah? And I know has become the new right, so please, I've seen that. You don't have to call me out on it. But so when I sit down to type, the words are generated in my brain, yeah? And then there's an energy that relays from my brain, like an electric energy that relays from my brain through my central nervous system to control my fingers, which then peck away at the keyboard, and they hit save, and they do all the things, right? But this is a flow of energy that is making all of this happen. Okay, so we're not talking about strictly on the woo-woo, sense of energy. But that is true too, I believe. And it's something I very strongly believe in, is that the entire universe is energetic. So are we. Okay, so we can go either way with this. Okay, but the point is, the reason I want to bring it up now, or the reason I want to bring it up to you, is whether you want to look at it from the scientific standpoint or you want to look at it from more of a spiritual standpoint. I'm good with either, yeah? But here's the thing. When we say where attention goes, energy flows, we're talking about not just what we see, right? But that is it too, right? Like if I'm reaching for a pen, right? My attention goes to that pen. The energy is going towards that pen. The energy is coming through my body to motivate my muscles and my ligaments and everything to pick up this pen. But it can also apply to an internal experience. You know what I mean? Or at least maybe you don't know what I mean. And so let me tell you what I mean. That's what I'm here for. That's what the whole point of this is. Not just to say, hey, you know what I mean? Okay, great podcast. Thanks. What am I paying attention to moment by moment? Because it's easy to say, okay, yeah, I pay attention to my coffee cup when I'm picking it up, or teacup really for me. When I'm picking it up and about to take a sip of tea, I'm paying attention to this cup. I'm paying attention to, brushing my teeth. Maybe. Maybe I'm not, though. Because the thing is that actually, even with the coffee cup, I don't necessarily have to, I'm not sitting here thinking, okay, send the signal to my hand so I can pick up the coffee cup and I can take the sip of tea and then put it back down. I'm not thinking about all that. So the question then becomes, well, what might I be thinking of? So let's take it. I know I mentioned the teacup and the toothbrushing, but those are really not very. Those are very inaccurate examples of what I mean. So I'm not using the word bad because we try not to judge things, but they are inaccurate. Scratch that from the record. Let's talk about something that's more challenging. Say pruning a plant. Let's say you have a plant at home like this guy back here, and it's getting way too long, and you want to chop it back for whatever reason. Maybe there's some people in Texas who you promised you'd send some propagals to that you still have not sent, so you're going to do that. Right? You know who you are. But so that is something that requires your attention. Yeah, because you can't just like, oh no, I messed up, right? Because that's something you haven't done a million times. A lot of things are this way. Maybe you're sewing something. Maybe you're repairing something. Maybe you're working on your car. Maybe you're building something. Maybe you're writing a story or something. There's a lot of things in our lives that we do require our attention to do. And so we have this sense that's like all there is to our attention. When we need to do something, we put our attention to it. But as is reflected in the first two inaccurate or inappropriate examples that I gave you, which was brushing our teeth and drinking anything. I mean, whether it's, whiskey to coffee to water to iced tea, it doesn't matter. We've done this so many times. We've picked up a cup and raised it to our lips and drank from the cup so many times that we do not have to pay attention to it as we're doing it. Same thing with brushing our teeth, same thing with taking a shower, same thing with driving our cars, same thing with washing the dishes. I could go on and on and on forever and name the things in our lives that we do all the time that we do not have to pay attention to. Now, this becomes the big aha moment. This becomes the big question. This becomes the whole thing here. Because while I'm doing all of those things, and really, I mean, I've never done the math, but I'm sure it's in the 90 percentile range, right? Maybe even 95, maybe 98% of the things that we do every day are the things that we don't have to think about doing because we've done them so many times. I like to use the driving as a really easy example of this, yeah? So when you first learned to drive, the first time you got in a car and with your, somebody sitting next to you, whether it was a parent or a caregiver or a cousin or whatever it was, this person sitting next to you, and you're there about to drive the car for the first time. Almost every one of us who was in that experience was completely overwhelmed with all the different details that are required. Like, okay, so we got the steering wheel, we got the seat, we got the seat belts, the mirrors, the music, the different dials and lights. And it's so overwhelming with all that requires our attention as we're doing this thing for the very first time. But now, most of us who, I know that there's probably not a lot of 16-year-old, people watching this. So for most of us who are listening and watching here, we, that moment that we spent, getting in the car for the first time that we're going to drive was decades ago, at least 10 years ago, at least 5 years ago. And so even within a year of that first time that you were so overwhelmed in that first time you were about to drive, even within a year or so, driving has become very automatic. And to this day, I mean, I get in the car, I don't even think about anything. Like, neither do you. We just take the key, we pop it in, we turn it on, we start driving. Oh, the mirror's not right. Okay, let me adjust it while I'm driving, right? We can, turn the radio on and off. A lot of people are texting while they're driving. We know that too, which is something I'm very, very much against. That's just as dangerous as drinking and driving. So please do not do that, even for a second. You never know when something's going to happen. Anyway, PSA over. The point is, though, that while we're driving, when we're alone, what are we paying attention to? Sometimes it's the music. Sometimes I think it's not the music. And so what is it? Now, here's the thing. There's only so much energy we have, right? I mean, and it's not to say that there's some people who have this theory that you only have a certain amount of energy for your whole life. I mean, that's not how it works, right? We renew our energy through food and sleep and rest and all that kind of stuff. So while energy is not a fixed, sort of income kind of thing, it is limited. There is only so much energy that we have from, meal to meal or day to day or moment to moment. There's only so much we can give of our energy. Therefore, there's only so much we can give of our attention. And so the most important aspect of the work that we do here in mindfulness and in this Showing Up to Life podcast and in all the different courses that I teach and all the different one-on-one clients I work with and all the different group clients I work with, every single bit of it is really hinged on this one skill, which is the skill, it's kind of a two-part skill, if you will, the skill to devote our attention to something. I really don't like to say pay attention because that feels like, you're in debt, although maybe that applies to what we're saying here, right? Because there is only so much you have. You're working against a pretty fixed budget. And so spending your attention, paying your attention it's very important to know what you're paying attention to. So again, the two skills, I'm sorry, I wasn't very clear just now, but the two skills are the ability to hold my attention on something, and also the ability to know and recognize when my attention has wandered and to what it has wandered, or where it has wandered off to, or whatever. I don't want to be grammatical. I don't want to get the grammatical police after me, the grammar cops. But the point is that moment by moment, and I can speak from my own experience, that moment by moment, before I learned these practices and developed the skills of attention and open awareness through these practices, I never knew where my mind was at any given moment. I mean, of course, you can always ask. Like if anybody said, "Hey, what are you thinking of?" Yeah, I can tell you what I'm thinking of, right? I mean, I can articulate it. But that doesn't mean that I, moment by moment, was sort of monitoring it. And I don't mean to make it think like my life now is not like, oh man, what am I paying attention? What am I paying? Like this constant monitoring and jumping on, anytime my mind wanders off. No, that's not it at all. It's actually much more fluid and much more intuitive. It's much more, of a latent skill at this point. It's basically habit. And I tell people all the time, as I teach people in mindfulness practices, by like week 5 or 6, they're like, oh my gosh, how much practice do I have to do here? Is this going to be my whole life is about practicing now? I don't want to live this way. It's not like that at all. Okay, you do these practices, and if you work with me, you do them pretty intensively for, for a few months, and then it becomes completely effortless. It becomes just who you are. Like I described to most of my clients, that I will have moments throughout, and I probably shouldn't say this, okay, but I barely do any formal practice anymore at all. Yes, 10, 15 minutes and when I wake up and 10, 15 minutes before I go to bed and my journaling. But other than that, that's it for formal practice. So for me, it's all about, the informal practices, which is just to be present with, to recognize that, yes, I'm picking up a cup. I'm feeling the weight of the cup. I'm feeling the warmth, or maybe it's not warm anymore, but the thing that I find is that from time to time, I will recognize like, whoa, I wasn't aware just for the last few minutes or whatever it was. Like I was just not here. But the beauty is that the minute that I attend to that, the minute I put my attention to the fact that my attention was not here, my attention is here now. And so that in and of itself becomes a practice. So I don't want you to think that these practices are, burdensome and something that it's like, like a ball and chain for the rest of your life. It is quite the opposite. That if you put the work in for, 8 to 12 to, maybe 16 weeks, 2, 3, 4 months, that's it. Then it starts becoming a habit. And again, you can't not be doing it, right? So it doesn't feel like effort at all. So anyway, the thing that I wanted to connect this idea to for you, right? Because this is really, really important. Again, where is our attention in any given moment? When we're doing the 95% of the things we do that we don't have to pay attention to, right? Where is our attention? Well, on a physiological level, if you want to approach it this way, whenever we are in what is known as a non-task oriented activity, which is to say the things that we don't really have to pay attention to, right? Like flipping a pancake or again, if you've cooked, like I've told you a few weeks ago, I've been cooking so much over these last few years that it's like things that used to be, cripple me with fear. Now it's like, oh yeah, no problem. Do it with my left hand, sweet, no sweat. Right. So in all of those things that we're doing, where is our attention now? Again, on a physiological level, pardon me, I know I got sidetracked there. Thinking about cooking pancakes. From a physiological level, as I started to say a few moments ago, when we are in a non-task oriented activity, what the brain is doing is the brain is in what is known as the default mode network, right? Just the way you default to it. Just when you don't have something to pay attention to, this is where your brain goes. Now, perhaps counterintuitively, it was definitely counterintuitive to me, right? I would assume that if I'm not doing anything, my brain's very quiet. Like there's very little activity going on. It's just like kind of, waiting for something to happen sort of, yeah? No, not even close. In fact, when we are in the default mode network, our brain is lit up in all these different areas. Mostly it's from the front and to the back, and then all the way up through the middle. But the point is that when we start thinking of something or we start doing something, all that energy focuses into one area or the other of the brain. So it is when we are not doing anything that we become much more widespread in the energy of our brain. Where attention goes, if it's nowhere, energy flows everywhere, right? Or to say that there's no attention means that you're, just letting it all fly, and that's where your energy goes. Now, on a psychological level, right, what they would say is that, when we are in the default mode network, what we're doing is we're selfing, which is to say we're thinking about all the stuff that applies to us, right? We're thinking of how, successful or not successful we are. We're thinking of how, handsome or not handsome, how young or old, how, right or wrong we are, whatever it is, right? But we're focusing on ourself. The other part of the selfing process from the default mode network, it pains me to tell you this, it's almost always negative. Almost always. Which is to say, when we're not doing anything, when we're not focused on something, which again means when we're driving our car, when we're brushing our teeth, when we're cooking our kids dinner, when we're doing the laundry, when we're all these different things that we could be doing without paying attention to it, in those moments where our attention really is going is on what's wrong with ourselves. Isn't that tough? Now, this could include an argument we might be having with someone. Right? Like, let's say there's an unresolved conflict out there between you and someone else. Do you find that popping into your mind while you're sweeping a floor or driving your car down the road and, some song that you've heard 500 times is playing in the background? Do you think about that person? And do you think positively and with kindness of that person? Or are you thinking, punching them in the nose or something like that? Or are you thinking about yourself and how horrible you did this thing and you embarrassed yourself or whatever? But it's always going to be something negative. I mean, again, not 100% always, but it's going to tend towards the negative. And this is not something that's wrong or bad, right? Your nervous system was formed, and our ancestors 200,000 years ago did not have the modern luxuries that we have. So they actually had to pay attention to the things they were doing. Otherwise, they became saber-toothed tiger food. So there was a need to be attentive. And so therefore, this default mode network was, in those moments where you're not attending to your safety right now, well, let's figure out where you can figure out safety from another time. And so it's a perfectly natural experience and process that's happening. But in our modern world, it's just, number one, it's prevalent where it's supposed to be a minority of the time. Now it is the outstanding majority of the time for us. And again, it's negative in a sense that it does not need to be. Our ancestors 200,000 years ago were not default networking, selfing about, what so-and-so said to them at the party around the fire, last Friday night. They were thinking, that time where I was uphill, I realized I was safer against that animal than when I was downhill. It's stuff like that. Constructive, helpful stuff. That's not the case with us. With us, it becomes rumination. Again, in a psychology level, right? It just becomes a constant stream of this sort of negative thoughts. And as you know from listening to this podcast, when we have a negative thought, there's a part of our brain that's responsible for our emotions and our response to things in the world that doesn't recognize that thought as just a thought. It recognizes it as something that's actually happening. Because it is. It's a thought that's happening right now. And so that your emotions are going to be influenced by that thought. Even though you're thinking about something that's not really happening right now, you're going to feel the emotions as though it were happening right now. That's the emotional response you're going to have. And of course, that emotional response, if it has anything to do with fear or anger or anything like that, which it is very likely to do, you're going to enter the stress response. That's how it goes. You're going to feel that tension in your body. And then the tension in your body and the cortisol and the adrenaline that's creating that tension is going to create another negative thought, or going to keep you thinking negatively about the thing that you're thinking about. So what I want to connect this to is two things. Number one is just a very basic sense or a basic premise or concept of attention. Just to know, like, okay, what is going on right now? What am I thinking about? What's happening in my mind right now, moment by moment? And the extent to which we can monitor that, and again, we do it through cultivating practices in the beginning, but eventually it just becomes this habitual understanding, just like you understand that you're hungry, right? Like, okay, I feel this thing, when you were a baby and you were hungry, you felt like the world was falling apart around you. You had to scream and you know everything was terrible until you got fed. Now you recognize, okay, that feeling in my stomach is just a little hunger. I'll be good. I get a little energy bar in an hour. I'll be fine. I'll survive, right? So in that very same way, that's the way that we can sense our attention, where it is at any given moment. It's just about that awareness. It's about holding our experience mentally as well as physically in our awareness. But the other thing that I want to connect this whole concept to for you, and I hope that this really resonates with you, is forgiveness. Because you see, when we don't forgive someone, when we refuse to forgive someone, then they're going to occupy that space of our attention almost all the time. Like anytime we get a minute, they're going to pop into our mind, right? Anytime we're not busy with something, anytime we're not, our attention is not called to something, then that person with whom we have a conflict is most likely to arise in our mind. And because we're in a conflict with them, it's always going to be a negative thing that's going on. So now here's the thing, what forgiveness does for us, right? As Jack Kornfield said in his book, The Wise Heart, which is one of my favorite books of all times, when he says that forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. Isn't that amazing? Because that's the thing, this conflict that you had with this person, you had the conflict. It happened. You said what you said. They said what they said. You did what you did. They did what they did. The whole thing, it's done. It happened. And there is no way to unring that bell. Unless you happen to have powers like Superman where you can fly around the earth the opposite direction of the orbit and or the rotation and then somehow spin the earth backwards so that everything goes backwards in time. But you get the silliness of my example. The point is that none of us can go back and change something that already happened. We cannot do it. So as we continue to pay attention to that thing that happened and how horrible it was and how, bad we feel about ourselves or how bad we feel about that other person or whatever it is, we keep going back to that thing with our attention. That's where our energy is going to. That is, we are giving our whole experience up for this thing that's a negative thing. It's a terrible thing that happened. Maybe it's not even that terrible, but it's unpleasant. It's, whatever it was. And so we're giving away our most precious resource to something that is already done. It's already happened. There's nothing we can do to change it. Now, forgiveness does not mean avoiding things, okay? And in a lot of ways, and this is one of the practices that I always love to give people, that, you know what, if there is a conflict in your life, or maybe there is a worrisome project that your mind keeps going to, whatever the thing is that you're, being drawn to every time you're not busy with something, right? Whatever that thing is, take a 15-minute period during your day. Maybe do multiple 15-minute periods during your day. Set a timer for 15 minutes, and for those 15 minutes, think about the thing, right? Take out a pen and paper, write it all down, record your voice, do a video, whatever you want it to be. But really get into it and roll up your sleeves and get deep into there and really get down and dirty with it. And then when the timer goes off, after 15 minutes, every time that pops into your mind again, you simply tell yourself, this is not the time. Because I already spent the 15 minutes that I'm supposed to spend on this. Again, maybe there's another 15 minutes later on or tomorrow, whatever, and that's when I'll think about this again. But for now, I'm going to redirect my attention away from this thing. And what I want to redirect my attention back into is the here and now. Forgiveness is what allows us to do that. Now, forgiveness itself becomes the process of returning to here and now, because just because you say, okay, I forgive this person, doesn't mean they stay forgiven. You know, I always like to, the way I describe forgiveness to clients that I work with is like it's painting a wall. Right? A wall in your house, right? You paint a wall, and we've all seen this happen at some point. Most of us anyway have, where you paint the wall and it looks beautiful. It's all shiny and rich. And oh my gosh, I'm so happy I did this. Oh, great. Let me go get a glass of water before I clean everything up, right? And I come back 10 minutes later, and now the wall that was just so beautiful and lovely is now splotchy. And oh my gosh, what happened here? The old color's coming through. Oh my gosh, this looks terrible. What do? Do we say, damn this wall, and start banging on it and try and knock it down or something? No. All we do is we simply apply another coat of paint. And so forgiveness is exactly that way. You can forgive someone, which again is just a form of acceptance. And that's also very helpful to understand about forgiveness. Take it out of that sort of mystical, big stuff, right? It's not. It's just about accepting it. Remember, it's giving up all hope for a better past. The thing already happened. The words were said. The actions were performed. The thing is already done. So therefore, forgiveness just means to accept that this is what happened. And so I accept it in this moment, and then sometimes seconds later, I have to accept it again. Sometimes it's a day later, sometimes it's hours, sometimes it's a year later. But when it arises again, I accept it, I forgive it, and in that process of forgiving and acceptance, I come back to the present moment. So the forgiveness becomes the vehicle or the gateway for this return. And the return is the whole skillfulness that we talk about, right? The first skillfulness is knowing where my attention is, and then to return it back to where, to the here and now. I hope you all get that. I hope some of you take this to heart, because I tell you, this is the most important thing of all of it, okay? All of it. So let me know if you have any questions. All right. I wish you well. Thank you again for watching and listening. I know I was supposed to do this before and I didn't, but y'all, I only have 3 reviews on Apple Podcasts. I just looked at it this morning, and there's only 3. One is from my wife, who's actually my almost ex-wife now. But all 3 are at least 3 years old. They're at least 3 years ago. So could you all please take just a few moments today and just write down just one little sentence of what you think about this podcast, okay? Again, not to feed my ego, which it will do, and I have to admit there's part of me that still enjoys that, but really it's about getting more people to hear these messages, because this stuff is important. And I think many of you who are listening today probably recognize that, yeah, I do that all the time, and again, it's depleting your energy, it's exhausting you, and it's taking away your energy from the stuff that matters in your life. And so I want more and more people to hear this, because it's so simple. It's such the easiest thing that you can fix. All right. And then if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, share, comment, please, 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 please. And otherwise, the last thing I'm going to ask you for is, may you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from fear and insecurity. May you find the capacity for forgiveness for yourself and others. May you feel loved from moment to moment, and may you always reside within the conditions of happiness. Bye, everybody.